years ago, I had the privilege of being at Joan and Jean's wedding. And the bride looks as beautiful today as she did that.
But Gene and Joe treated me like a son. Gene and Joe.
Well, I was a class. And yes, and he came back one night. He had gone up to Massachusetts, I think, it was New York. He came back in, and he lived. His room was right across the hall from mine. He came over to my room, and he said, "John, I've met the girl I'm going to marry." And I said, "You spent what, 3 hours with her?" He said, "No, I mean it." And I'm so glad it was you.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michael. I'm Gene's grandson. And probably since the first service that we had in January and up until now, I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, "Your grandfather was quite a character." Well, I've yet to see a character in a cartoon, movie, or TV show that made me laugh as much as he did. From always telling me to never always telling me not to suck any beans on my nose. I'm not gonna lie, I still don't understand that.
Your mother explained it at the first funeral. It means be safe.
From all the times he tried to publicly embarrass me, and obviously succeeded. I couldn't have asked for a better grandfather, more loving, supportive. No, I'm definitely gonna miss the hell out of him. And I would have loved to hear what he would have to say about a Manhattan being in that glass.
I know.
That's what I said. Gary said that's correct.
Oh, well.
And he's probably not. I made
It's
the
too
joke yesterday. He's probably
fancy,
not even here right now watching because he's probably watching the Masters.
Oh, yeah.
To my grandfather.
He was very proud of you. Very proud of you.
I want to say something. My son Michael called me up many years ago and he says, "You know, I met a beautiful girl in Dallas, in Texas, and I'm very serious with her, and her father sent us an invitation to come over to meet them. Would you like to meet their parents?" And I said, "Sure." So my wife and I flew over to Germany. We met Joan and Jean, and we became very fast friends.
We didn't even care if I got married, did we?
It's very unusual for a situation like that to develop with in-laws, you know. So we became good friends. It took us all over Europe. We had some great times, and I really miss it.
We had some great times. Cheers.
Well, I'm one of Gene's roommates at the academy. This is our plebe year. Now, for those of you who don't know what the academies are like, your plebe year is not fun. Your plebe year is where you find out whether you can survive. And we had another roommate whose name was Norm. Well, Gene and I decided to name Norm Nummy. He never forgave us. But as far as we're concerned, Gene and I would talk a lot, and Norm he'd be off in his calculus somewhere. He was sort of an academic type. Gene and I more on the other level, and it's always a pleasure to, it was always a pleasure to know Joni, be with Joni. It turns out that my first wife, Susie, and Joni shared an apartment outside of the walls of the academy during my first class year, our first class year. And so, of course, Joni knows more about the fights that I had with my first wife than anybody. But at any rate,
I love your Elaine.
it's been fun keeping in touch. I can't say how much I love Gene.
Yeah.
It was just
He loved
something.
all of you.
Yeah. And so anyway, I wish I had a goofy story I could tell you about him.
Well, I'm sure you could think of something.
But you'd think so. Anyway, here's to Gene.
Well, let me tell you about the time when I first met Gene and first realized that I was going to be friends with that guy. We were plebes at the Naval Academy, and I lived right across the hall from him, and he came over one night. And that day, I smoked, he smoked, and not marijuana, cigarettes. And so we were sitting up late. Pretty strict rules there about when taps goes, and when taps go, lights are out. You got to be in bed, and they expect you to. Well, we were sitting up late, and he came over, and we were up on the top floor of the academy, and you could open those windows and then walk outside and sit on that ledge out there and look out over the Chesapeake Bay, and nice view. And besides that, you could smoke out there, and smoke wouldn't come back in, and they wouldn't come bother you because you were supposed to be in bed. Well, we were talking solving the world's problems, and we got on to religion. And Gene's father was a preacher, and Gene was a real philosopher. And he said, "Well, do you believe in life after death?" And I said, I don't know. I'm just kind of unknown about that. And he said, "Well, I think there is life after death." And he says, "And when I get there," he says, "and I know I'm going to heaven." And he says, "When I get there and I meet God, the first question I'm going to ask him is, who made you?" From that point, I said, "Hell, this guy's a philosopher. He's going to be my friend."
Dylan Grieslein was not able to be here. Another Air Force officer that worked for Gene, but has kept in touch with Joan for all these years. One of the most classics, and I love the fact that he always pushed the envelope. As we all know, Gene had certainly later in his career had an issue with weight. He sort of always was fighting the weight thing, and of course we had to weigh in every year. So when it was time for Gene to weigh in, as Bill would describe it, the first thing he would do is he would go get his shoes with the highest heels, because it was by height, and you got more credit if you were taller than he was. So he'd put on his shoes with the real high heels, and then the kicker, and Bill swears this is true, he would not wear any underwear so he could save a few hours. I'm not even sure any of us want to picture that. That way he would go over, he would go in and weigh in, and somehow he always snuck in, and then he would go out and eat and drink like crazy. He did that to it. But he and the Air Force had an interesting relationship as far as that goes.
In relation to that, I can remember I went into the Marines, and Gene went into the Air Force, and I was stationed down at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I think you guys were over in North Carolina someplace, pretty nearby. And so Gene and Joni come over to visit with us, and we were sitting around talking, and Gene says, "I'm getting out of the Air Force." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'm getting out of the Air Force." He said, "I'm just damn tired. They're always on me about my weight and everything." He said, I'm getting out. And I said, "Oh, gee." I thought, and he left, and James says, "You think you really will?" And I said, "No, I never will." Well, he did. He got out of the Air Force. And we kind of lost track of him for a couple of years. And then the next thing I know, I get a call from Gene, and he's back in the Air Force. And I said, "What the heck is going on?" He said, "John," he said, "I got out because the Air Force was always on me about my weight." He says, "But those damn people at IBM were on me worse than the Air Force."
It wasn't going to meet the initial operating capability date, and this was much bigger than just an Air Force thing. And he went back, and he literally met with DOD officials, Secretary of the State, and the whole thing, and they said, "Well, how are you going to make it happen?" And he came back and he said, "Give me $15 million and my own people, and I'll make it happen." I said, "Okay." So he flew back and he told us that, and he said, "Where'd you come up with that number?" I said, "I don't know, I just guessed." And he did it. I mean, flat out did it. And just like, no, they wanted a number, so I gave them one. And that's how he managed. It was a significant historical event.
Jack, I
He was
remember-
responsible for it.
When he came home from Belgium one night, he said, well, I gave Belgium a hospital. I said, gee, can you do that? He said, no, I did.
Gosh, they all come back, because we went to Belgium and they were hosting a dinner for him, and I don't even know what the term is, but it's raw hamburger is what they eat. So they brought all this raw hamburger out, and it was a big deal. And we looked at it and said, "There's no way." He looked at us and he said, "Eat that." So we all ate raw hamburger and loved it.
It's steak tartare, Jack.
Steak tartare.
Yeah.
It was raw hamburger to me.
But that didn't sound bad.
You were
Yeah, I
probably
know.
there, Jack. I only heard about it. At Comiso, where he basically threatened to castrate
Oh, yes.
an Italian officer if he didn't do something.
loves that job.
It was almost an international. It literally said that, except he said it a little differently.
I don't want to, belabor it, but I've got to pass on. This was probably the most significant event in the world. We were, again, behind and building out the base down there, and there was an Italian contractor doing the work. It was always, come on, Dave, And Gene looked at him, and Gene was a big man, as we all know, and the contractor was a big man, and they just looked at each other. And Gene said, if you don't get this done, and it was all through translation, of course, he said, I will castrate you.
Oh, he didn't say it that nicely.
And he
No,
did
he
say,
didn't
he
say
would
it
cut
that
off
nicely.
your, whatever. And I guess the most significant thing, there's two gentlemen that were used to getting things done in the world, and whenever Gene saw that guy afterwards and he wanted him to hurry up, he would just go.
Oh, I remember that.
So we told that to the procurement officer.
Yeah.
We told it to the procurement officer and talked about the guy was, he can't do that. That's against all the rules. And Gene just goes, I got it done. I got it done.
The man was, but he was some big shot. And he wrote congratulating Gene on the job well done. And he pointed out, he says, my staff tells me I do not want to know how some of these things came about. I congratulate you on a good job.
Briefly about him. My dad's was his brother Jim. My dad's been gone a long time, but I have many memories of Gene. My wife does too. He definitely set a good example for many people in this room, myself as well. Gave me some good advice as well as a young boy. Told me many times not to suck any beans up my nose. many times. But Gene, he could have a very serious side to him, as we all know, and he could have a very funny side to him. And that's one of the things that made him, such a great man, because he knew when to apply what. But deep down, Gene was a very loving, caring man. And I know that about him, and I think we all know that about him. And here's
Did you meet him in his underwear?
I did meet him in his Yes. Well, it happened to be Gary and I. We were high school sweethearts, and we were on a date at his parents' house. We were just sitting watching TV, and
Gene had gone to bed.
he had gone to bed, and the phone rang. I think it was
Janet
Janet
called.
calling, and it was where did they live?
It
Because
was
of the
when
time
you-
difference.
I was in Texas.
Yeah, you were in Texas.
And anyway, you were calling to talk to him.
My dad just yelled for him and said, Gene, Janet's on the phone, and up the stairs he
And
came.
so I'm just sitting there.
In his underwear, and Jackie was sitting right there, and he said, howdy! And on up to the phone he went.
I never let him forget that. But he was proud of that anyway.
He was proud of it.
I made the best chili in the world. John said, well, go ahead and make it. And he never made chili right. You see, you didn't know that. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, let him get himself out of this mess. And he did remember enough of it to get
Well,
it done.
he looked over at the boy and said, do you like it hot? And he says, you can't make it too hot for
Oh,
us."
yeah.
And Gene says, Oh, we'll try.
Those poor kids suffered forever. But I thought that was so funny, to be bragging about his great chili, he never even met. I didn't know that. Yeah.